Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mondays with Moshe. This is Moshe Norman from Lakewood, New Jersey, and I would like to introduce tonight's presenter. I have been pursuing Dr. Hindie M. Klein for a long time, and we finally got her at the expense of somebody else who is losing out tonight. Thank you, Hindie, for joining us tonight and agreeing to come on.
So welcome.
And yeah, it's really, really nice to have you. Hindie, by the way, is a very prominent member, a board member of Nefesh International. For those of you who are familiar, that's an Orthodox organization for mental health professionals. If you're not familiar, take a look, check it out. Nefesh International, really, really nice network of over 1,000 mental health professionals from the Orthodox Jewish community, and also a member of OHEL in New York. So Hindie, really, thank you for coming on. Tonight's topic is the process of the use of self in therapy.
The use of the self.
The use of the self. When you talk to a psychoanalyst, you better make sure you got every word down pat, because if I miss an accuracy, then it could mean a whole different thing. So Hindie, I wanted you to tell us about what the difference between self and the self is. Self with a capital S, self with a small s. And before that, just tell us who you are, how you got into this field, and how you ended up where you are. And in analysis.
Should I tell my story? Okay, hello everybody. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Moshe, thank you so much for inviting me. Moshe has this wonderful show every week. It's really amazing. And all the wonderful people that have joined and have presented, and the wonderful members that joined, so it's really lovely. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a psychologist. I'm a New York State licensed psychologist. I got my doctorate. I'm dating myself, I know. But I got my doctorate in 1985 in school community clinical psychology. And I got my postdoctorate in psychoanalysis. I did a 10-year postdoc in psychoanalysis from NYU Postdoc. So I trained, I'm a certified psychoanalyst, adult psychoanalyst. For years, several years, I served as a team leader in an adult home. So I learned about primary process by working with a caseload of 50 chronic schizophrenics, which was a lot of fun.
Wow.
And then I went on to become the director of TICFA. Now it's called TICFA at OHEL. It's part of OHEL. It originally started out as another agency. It was called New Hope Guild TICFA. It was part of another agency. In 2001, we transferred over to OHEL. I was proud to be part of that staff. And I've remained close to the staff. I ran the clinic for 25 years. I was the center director for 25 years. And now I do some other projects for OHEL in terms of, senior clinical consultant, stuff like that. And I'm on the board of Nefesh, and I'm on the board of Amudim, and I'm on the board of Kojo, and I'm on the executive committee of the United Task Force. We're a consortium of 40 agencies that service the community with whatever, resources, education, presentations to kind of help and educate the community. So that's pretty much my background. I got into it because, to make a long story very short, I started out as a math major. I had to take a statistics course, and the psych statistics was easier than the math statistics. So I ended up taking the psych statistics. And I said, this is so easy and so fun compared to math statistics. And then I just went on to pursue this. And I was, somebody said to me, oh no. And in my years, going into psychology and psychoanalysis was a little bit taboo. But I promised this person that I would use all my skills to work with the community. And thus I have.
Good for you.
But
Hindie, you say that in 1985, going into psychoanalysis was taboo, and I want to challenge you.
No, going into psychology.
Psychology.
There were very few Orthodox Jewish women, female PhDs in psychology.
Okay.
At that time. Now
the question that I have for you is psychoanalysis in 2023 still relevant? Because you'll have so many people who think, who needs psychoanalysis? We can fix people in 4 sessions with tapping, or I don't know.
So I guess that's your answer. We can fix people in 4 sessions. I guess what I do and what I love to do is not the quick fix. It's not. It's deeper. I feel it's more meaningful. Not everybody will agree with me. They consider psychoanalysis outdated. But interestingly enough, there are many psychoanalytic training institutes around that do really meaningful and important work and do wonderful training. And, you see these articles all the time about, is psychoanalysis dead? Is Freud dead? And so on and so forth. And I don't agree with all of Freud's formulations and all of his theories. And there are many things that he is the founder, so to speak, and the basis in general of many psychotherapies. Many people who have started out and doing other things now started out as analysts, or certainly with analytic training. And I have done other training. I have a 2-year certificate in sensory motor psychotherapy. I've done several trainings in somatic, which I feel are very, very important. And I feel that they augment psychoanalytic work really well, because if you are in a crisis mode with a patient and you need to calm down their nervous system, and that is not necessarily done so quickly in a deeper rooted psychoanalytic treatment, you will get that kind of relief and help with mindfulness and meditations and the various things that you can do in a sensory motor or somatic modality. So I respect that really a lot. I don't do EMDR. I trained in it many, many years ago.
So is there something that's necessary? In other words, if you're saying you can help somebody calm their nervous system through sensory motor or somatic, right? So then is psychoanalytic work or psychoanalytic psychotherapy, which I consider myself a psychoanalytic psychotherapist.
Right. And they're very similar, though they're not the same. I don't know if you want me to explain.
That's how my supervisor would consider me. So, and I consider myself a systems therapist. So if those things are so helpful, then why the need for psychoanalytic psychotherapy? What's the value? Why is it important?
So a lot of the types of work that I do at this point, and there are many, many trauma therapists that work, sensory motor is a trauma treatment, somatic is a trauma treatment, EMDR is a trauma treatment. And they're all wonderful and they all work really well. But I have gotten patients over the years that have come to me and they're in sensory motor, or they've gone through sensory motor, and sensory motor has helped them tremendously. I'm not saying not. I'm not trying to say it's either or. Why does it have to be either or? First of all, I think it depends on the person. So just to give you some, a study I once read, or Freud once said this, I think, that who is the most who benefits the most from psychoanalytic work? 3 things. You have to be verbal, you have to be intelligent, and you have to have the capacity for reflective functioning, to look inside yourself and to reflect. Now, it's not that if, they don't give you an IQ test before you start a psychoanalytic treatment. They do not. However, you do have to have that capacity for reflective functioning. And that's why, Freud felt that you can only really do psychoanalysis with neurotics, not with psychotics and more disturbed people. However, I have colleagues from postdoc who do major, major psychoanalytic work with psychotic individuals, and they're very successful.
Yes, and we've had people on the show, someone like Paris Williams, who himself was schizophrenic and was treated, through probably psychoanalytic psychotherapy, and believes very strongly that there's room for healing psychotics.
Exactly. So I think that what happens is with psychoanalytic work is that there is so much that you do, the intricacies and the nuances of working with a patient in a very, very nuanced way of, the transference, the countertransference, what I call the intersubjectivity of really kind of the mutuality of the work that you do together. You really kind of get into a lot of nitty-gritty stuff in terms of background, attachments, traumas, sexual trauma, and so on and so forth. So I've done some really, it's not to say that other people in other modalities don't also do some really wonderful and successful work, magical work. But my heart belongs to, it's just where everybody has to find what's good for them. When I was at TICFA, I used to have a lot of supervisees. I've supervised hundreds and hundreds of people over the years. And they would come to me and they would try to, people knew in the clinic, everyone had a supervisor, but they would come to me if they wanted psychoanalytic supervision. And I would say to them, you don't have to do psychoanalytic work. Because I would always talk to them once they finished their internships or their postgraduate hours and they're moving on to private practices, go do what you are passionate about. It doesn't have to be psychoanalytic work. It could be CBT, DBT, and all the other things that we're talking about today. But just be passionate about what you do, because the more that you are passionate about it, the better work you will do, and the better you'll be able to get steeped into it, which will be pick up the vibe of your patient. And for me, even though I'm trained in a little bit in the other things, and I do appreciate them greatly and respect them, I keep coming back to this. I just love doing this kind of work.
Come back to where your heart's at.
Yeah, you come back to where your heart's at. I'm doing this for 37 years, and I guess I'm going to keep on doing it.
There you have it for the Sarashneer program. Okay, they know
the Sarashneer program is.
There's a bunch of members from the Sarashneer program on tonight, and
Yeah,
they just got a little pep talk about this. Just go where your heart's at, and you'll end up back there.
oh, you'll be so much of a better therapist if you go to your passion, if you follow your passion. Really, so much more.
So, Hindie, let's talk a little bit about the self. Okay, we'll talk about the use of the self. I think that word in the therapy context has different meanings to different people. Can you share with us, what do you mean, or what do you believe literature means when we talk about the use of the self?
Okay, so what I mean is I call it developing a fine-tuned instrument. Different modalities and treatments use different types of instruments, right? Or different types of techniques. There's tapping, there's this thing that I think the best use is the self, meaning that you use via your, what I call the transference, countertransference matrix, by knowing yourself, by understanding yourself, what makes you tick. And therefore I will say now, anybody at this point who is on this Zoom session who has not been in their own treatment or is not planning to go into their own treatment, that's part of using the self, right? Because when you use the self, you are able to understand who you are exactly and how that impacts on the patient and how the patient will impact on you. And so you are the fine-tuned instrument that's helping heal this patient by understanding what's going on with the patient, because it's an intersubjective experience between you and the patient. I mentioned this to you, Moshe, what I call Thomas Ogden, famous analyst out in California, I think. And he talks about the analytic third. And I feel that's such an important concept. It is the intersubjective experience between the therapist and the patient. What goes on consciously and unconsciously between the patient and the patient. And that's how you pick up the nuances where you're going to say, like, what's going on around here? What's going on between us? What's being acted out, acted in, enacted? What's going on? And you need to use yourself literally second to second. You can't just kind of what Hirsch talks about when he talks about coasting in the countertransference. You don't just sit back and say, people have this misconception that people come to psychoanalytic psychotherapy and they talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and the therapist just sits there and goes, Well, that is wrong. That is not what good analysts and good psychoanalytic psychotherapists do. They pick up, they know when to talk, they know when not to talk, they know how to question delicately, nuanced. That's how you use yourself. That's what I mean by the use of the self. Excellent. Understanding yourself in such an exceptionally, exquisitely nuanced way that you know how to do the work.
Excellent. What we're going to elaborate on that. I just want to make a couple of announcements before. First of all, very important for those of you who have questions or comments, they are very welcome here. And
yes.
And the way that you will share them is by clicking on the reactions tab, which is found on the bottom right of your screen. If you are on a computer, if you're on a cell phone, I'm not sure where it's found, but you'll find it. And you click on it and click the raise your hand button, and we'll call on you. The second announcement is that I'm happy to announce that Mondays with Moshe is now sponsored by okclarity.com. okclarity.com is the only platform for wellness professionals who work with the Jewish community to be found online. Their innovative directory allows users to search for therapists, psychiatric medication providers, coaches, and nutritionists for free. I'm proud to have my very own OK Clarity website where potential clients can find me or simply learn about all I do. You know that therapists don't enjoy marketing themselves. Enter OK Clarity, who does this for you in a professional and classy manner with actual results. when you are ready to invest in your online presence to increase your exposure and your client base, reach out to them to see if you qualify to join. So go for real quick clarity. I have a profile here. It gets tons of clicks, and it's nice to see your numbers go up. Okay. So let's slow down some of the things you said. I want to talk a little bit about intersubjectivity. To me, what's most fascinating is how can it be that really knowing yourself and knowing how you're being affected in the relationship between you and the client, how can that actually be helpful? Can you give maybe an example that we can base it off and break apart? What does it mean? If I know myself, so I know my weaknesses, I know my strengths, I accept them, and then some things will trigger me from the clients and some things won't. How exactly does it help for me to know myself when I'm engaging with the client?
Well, I'll answer it really simply. I'll give you a simple example. So you're an analyst, or you're a psychoanalytic psychotherapist, or you want to be a psychoanalytic psychotherapist, but you haven't been analyzed yourself, and you don't know all your own hangups. Because a person who's really a fine-tuned psychoanalytic psychotherapist or psychoanalyst has been in their own treatment, whether they've been in a full psychoanalysis. I was on the couch, I can't tell you how many years, many years on the couch 3 times a week. That's part of the analytic training.
By the way, I'm on the couch 7 times a week. I don't know what you're talking about.
I was in analysis for 22 years, but not all of them were on the couch. And everyone kept saying, okay, enough already, enough of this psychoanalysis. And I said to my analyst at the very end, I said, I really think I need to stop this. It's time for me to stop analysis. I'm here too long. He says,
let's explore that.
He was a real Freudian. Didn't say that much. What's stopping you? Oh, there he went.
I'm glad another year you would have turned into a couch potato.
Right. So let's say you don't know a lot of your own stuff, and you should. You better know everything about yourself, your hangups, your mother issues, father issues, spouse issues, children issues, trauma issues, Holocaust, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th generation issues. You better know it. Because if you don't, and somebody is going to say something to you, and you're not aware of it consciously, pre-consciously, or unconsciously, right? Because topographical Freudian model, conscious, pre-conscious, unconscious. If you don't, then you're going to do or say or give off a vibe of something that will not be empathically attuned to your patient. So, for example, he's clapping. Are you clapping? Oh, that's a good. Thank you. If you don't know, you're right. So you have I'll be the classic, right? Classic mother issue. Nah, it's okay. I'm fine. My mother, she's great. She's great. You may or may not love or hate your mother, but whatever it is, you're not that. It's not, and certainly in the conscious level or even pre-conscious level, right? So what happens? This patient walks in with a wowsy of a mother issue, and you are treating her, either you're countertransferentially denying your feelings and dismissing her feelings, or you're over-identifying with her feelings, or you're getting drowsy and falling asleep in the sessions because you can't tolerate all the stuff that she's saying about her mother, which might be triggering you about your mother, but you're not even aware of it. That is not a good use of the self, right? You want to know everything about yourself so that trauma, especially trauma. I'll give you a classic example of something that happened to me in the early parts of my practice when I don't even think I was finished my postdoc at that time. I was maybe a candidate, and I got a call, and I am disclosing here, so I'm telling you in advance that I'm disclosing something personal about myself. My husband and I lost a child many years ago, he died when he was a little boy, and it was very tragic, and so on. So I got a call from a cousin of mine who said she had a very, very close friend, a girlfriend who just lost a child. She wanted to know if I would take on this case because the mother is filled with grief, and she knows that I could identify with that and I could understand that because of what I'd been through. But would that be okay for me to do? Would I be able to take on such a case if I myself have my own countertransferential issues and feelings about, children who have died and who have suffered and have died? So I thought about it, and I guess because of my own wonderful, I had I had a treatment before my analysis. I had a 7.5 year, once a week Freudian treatment before my analysis. Then my therapist said to me, okay, now you're ready for postdoc and analysis. So off I went. But that's how she saved my life, and she was amazing. And I said, I think I could do this. So the woman comes in and she was very broken, and it was just horrific to see. And this is what she did for 6 months, every single session, that's how vivid it is for me, even though it happened most probably somewhere between 25 and 30 years ago. So she said to me, you don't know what it's like to lose a child. You don't know what it's like to lose a child. How could I be talking to you every week? She kept coming back, mind you. You don't know what it's like to lose a child. At some point, and I was very attuned to what she was saying and how I was reacting to it, because I was discussing it with my supervisor and my analyst and so on. But I was very, very attuned to it. And I was wondering, because there's arguments back and forth. Should I share with my patient that I too lost a child? So I know exactly how she feels. And at that point, it was pretty fresh. Now it's many, many years later. But at that point, it was pretty fresh for me as well. Should I share that? What will that do to the therapy? Rangers will say, wow, now I feel understood because you told me what, your issue, your circumstance. Did I share with my patient that I had lost a child? Anybody who thinks, well, no, but everybody's blacked out here, so I don't see that many faces. But what do you think? Moshe, what do you think? Do you think that I shared with my patient with all good intentions, because maybe it would help her feel more understood that I lost a child?
I mean, as a good adherent analyst, probably not, but as a compulsive, neurotic therapist, maybe yes. In other words, this is the part of self-disclosure. It's a fascinating discussion because
I have a whole other thing on
we'll talk about that soon.
We'll talk about that later. So the answer is, I saw a few no's. There's a chat down here where I think people said no. Well, they're all right. Of course, I did not share. And do you know why? Not because over the years, I've become a little bit more mellowed, and I have shared things with patients, certain things that I feel are important. But why have I not shared? Why did I not share them? It was a very clinical, therapeutically clinical reason.
Someone's writing, shouldn't be about you. Right.
Exactly.
It was certainly
therapy, and then she would say, "Oh, I can't believe it, you too," and then she would feel bad to disclose more and to really be in touch with her grief and to yell and scream and sob because she doesn't want to hurt my feelings because I also lost a child. It's not about you; it's about them, and and that's why you need to understand yourself, the self, and use yourself to make these kind of wise decisions. Maybe with somebody else, although now that's a whole other discussion that we could get into. Years ago, there was so much anonymity, nobody knew a thing about you. Now, internet, social media, click, click, click. They come in, they tell me more about myself than I know. Say, oh, really? I saw that you were honored here, and I saw that you lost a child, and I saw that you blah, blah, blah. Like, I saw I have all these different, if you go on the OHEL website, I did a whole series of little videos for OHEL on various, different disorders. And I did them and I forgot about them. They come in and they say, oh yeah. So that's a whole other chapter of self-disclosure or disclosure during the age of social media. That's a whole other chapter. But so you need to, that's the use of the self. I had to use myself to make that decision. Do I or don't I? Somebody else would disagree with me and say, yes, I think it's important. Oh, so people are.
Yeah, people are, guys, if I would appreciate using the talking instead of the chat box, but Hindie, could we talk about it for a minute?
Sure. I see there's a lot of comments, that's all.
Yeah. I think
rid of the comments right now. Okay.
I think that there is a time and place for self-disclosure for sure. And I think the point that you're trying to make is what's compelling the self-disclosure, and number one, what's compelling the self-disclosure, and number two, will it be helpful for the client or the patient in your case? Okay. And I think where it gets really, those are questions that we could usually answer Where it gets slippery
But
is,
look, can I just say one thing? Where are you, Moshe? Oh, there you are. Can I just say one thing? It doesn't, there's so many different variables.
yes,
It's about you. It's about your patient. It's about the relationship between you and your patient.
correct.
It's about the longevity of the treatment. It's about where you are in the treatment,
Yes.
not disclosing anything to anybody in the first few months of treatment. I don't know.
There's different places in there, and this is part of the point that I want to bring out with this, which is, I would say another nuance besides the therapist's desire or drive to share, and taking into account whether or not it will be helpful for the client or the patient. There's also the idea that how many times do we believe something that we don't really believe because of our desire? Okay. So, in other words, I might want to share something with my client and convince myself or believe that it's in the client's best interest because I have such a strong desire to share. And that's where I think it gets most complicated.
That's a countertransferential issue, you realize. That's a boundary countertransferential issue.
Talk about, I don't know that everybody here knows exactly what countertransference is. Talk just for a minute about what you mean.
Okay, so countertransference. Transference is the projection of feelings and thoughts and feelings and so on of the patient's early imagos or early, significant others onto the therapist, right? I'm the patient's mother, the patient's father, the patient's whoever. So that gets transferred onto me. That's transference. Countertransference are the feelings, thoughts, consciously and unconsciously, that I may have towards the patient. But there's reactive and subjective countertransference. So reactive countertransference could be the patient is telling me this horrific story of trauma or whatever, something happened to them, terrible, terrible story. And I'm reacting to that because that is a horrible, horrible story of, so it's a kind of like and I don't know how to handle my own feelings and thoughts about a trauma, a rape, a Holocaust or something. So I'm having a reactive countertransferential reaction. It's my thoughts, feelings. There are some writings, Freud coined the term countertransference in 1910 when he wrote an article about it. Then it kind of put by the wayside. I'm not going to go into all the details of all the other analysts, but then it had a rebirth in the 1950s, and everybody was writing about countertransference reactions. And if you want to read, you students out there, you want to read a really interesting article, read D.W. Winnicott, Hate in the Countertransference, how you have to be able to hate the patient before you learn to love them or while you're learning to love them. So anyway, and countertransference could be totalistic, everything about the patient, conscious, unconscious, everything about, or it could be something very specific about that patient. Now there's subjective countertransference, meaning that you have a bias, let's say, about child abuse. Not that everybody doesn't have a bias, you know what I'm saying? Something very specific. So they bring up something, you will have a reaction to it, not because it's something that happened to them, but so when you're trying to talk about or treat that particular issue, right away you're going to have a reaction because that's your subjective countertransference as opposed to reactive countertransference. And so on. And you have to also understand that countertransference can be very much unconscious, right? Very much unconscious. And so you're not aware, and that's why it's very important to your own treatment, supervision, peer supervision, ongoing training. This is what behooves. If I could just tell a very, very quick story about that. I had a therapist who came to me at Tikva. He was finishing up his workshop, and he got his license. He's a C. He's so experienced already. And he came for an interview, excuse me. And he had an LCSW, very, very intelligent man. And we're talking about cases. And I said, if you work here at Tikva, one of the things that we offer you weekly supervision. Once a week, 45 minutes, unless you have special whatever, but you get once a week supervision, 45 minutes. So he says to me, I don't need supervision. I said, what do you mean you don't need supervision? I have my C, I have my supervision, I passed everything, I passed all my tests. I don't need supervision anymore. It's okay, you could save your money. You don't have to give me supervision. So I said, you don't want supervision? I'm giving you an opportunity to have supervision every single week and you don't want supervision? He goes, no, I don't need it. Did I hire this therapist? I did not hire this therapist. I don't want a therapist like that in our midst. Everybody needs supervision. right? I'm doing this 37 years. I'm in 2 supervision groups, 2 or 3 supervision groups. Everybody needs supervision.
Okay, let's go back to the discussion that we were having about the therapist countertransference, which
Yes.
you call that countertransference, when the therapist feels compelled to disclose, and that's
No,
blind
that's countertransference disclosure.
disclosure.
Countertransference are the feelings and thoughts and reactions that you have to what the patient is presenting to you in the treatment. And it could be anything. It could be the way they look, the way they speak, what they're bringing up. You're having a countertransferential reaction to the patient. Why? That's the part of the exploration and understanding the self. But that's countertransference. Countertransference disclosure is very different. It's when you decide to disclose something about what you're experiencing, but not a personal thing about who you are, but you're going to disclose what you are experiencing vis-a-vis the patient, and that's called
Well, that's something that's helpful. I'm assuming you mean
that's very helpful.
Okay,
Countertransference.
that's not what I was referring to. I was
Oh.
referring to when I feel compelled to disclose, but I convince myself that it's in the patient's best interest, when really what's happening on a less conscious level is that I'm doing it for myself. So that I was saying that's a slippery slope, because believing that it's in the patient's self-interest could be true, or it could be your own denial.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, it could be your own issues, not denial necessarily, right? Whatever, one of your own defensive maneuvers, intellectualization, rationalization, and we also need to talk, Moshe, as you know, we need to talk about projective identification.
Yes,
huge,
of course.
huge topic in an understanding of countertransference.
You're making me very anxious about that. Get it?
I do. I am.
Yirmia, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that in psychoanalysis, and the thing that you're figuring out a lot of the stuff that it's being projected and countertransference and all these things. The figuring it out itself is the solution. Once the person figures it out, and all the defenses and all the transference and all the things, that's the healing, or there's something deeper?
You're saying that once you figure out what the issue is via the transference, countertransference, that's enough? It's not enough. That's the road to the healing.
So what is the healing itself?
The healing is what goes on afterwards between you and your patient in terms of figuring out, now I understand this about myself. Now, what am I going to do about it? But all of that takes place within the therapeutic relationship. All of that takes place within the
like a behavioral plan? Like, what am I going to do about it?
No, it's not a behavioral plan. It's an unfolding of a relationship where people will come in and they'll talk about their stuff, and you'll analyze them, and you'll come up, very often when it's appropriate. Interpretations are very, very important. They need to be timed in a certain way. Don't try to show somebody how smart you are by giving what we call a premature interpretation. I think it's just the process of deeper and deeper understanding and knowing that you are doing that and understanding yourself. The patient is being understood within a very stable, safe, trusting, corrective, emotional experience.
So what I'm going to get is that
that's why they evolve, and they begin evolving and developing kind of better relationships, better attachments. So if you are seeing somebody who had tremendous amount of developmental trauma, so to speak, but through the relationship between you and the patient is developing a more stable, coherent sense of self, where they feel, you know what, now I can make decisions. Now I could feel that I have the confidence. Now I feel that I could move forward in life instead of feeling insecure and depressed and anxious. That's how they go forward. They go forward with your help.
So it's 2 steps. It's the
psychoanalysis does not tell. In psychoanalytic treatment, you do not tell the patient what to do. Unless they're in a dangerous situation and they could be harmful to self or others, and they lose their sense.
And even then, they don't listen to us. By the way,
Right.
Even then, they don't listen to us.
Right.
They're saying there's 2 steps.
I love when they come in and say, "Could you just tell my wife that she should do this?" And I say, if people would listen to me, then I would tell them what to do, but they don't.
You know what happens? You tell a patient what to do. They come back in the next week. I did exactly what you said. It backfired and it was terrible. And I'm never listening to you again.
Well, on a deeper level, or they say, I couldn't do what you said. And then they feel like a disappointment to their mother again.
Right. And there's shame.
So what did we do? We just reenacted another more evidence that I'm a failure.
You're doing the work of psychoanalytic and the use of the self is very, very slowly knowing, psychoanalytic work takes longer. It's not 10 sessions. So, if you want to do the 10-session fix, whether it's insurance-based or any other based, that's, psychoanalytic psychotherapy is really not for you.
I feel like Yirmia still has a question though.
Yeah.
What it's
I just
really-
want to clarify that there's two steps about this, what you're saying about the psychoanalysis. There's
is-
the part of like getting awareness about yourself and about your whatever, your narratives, your transference, your past, how it's behaving now and everything. And then, but that itself doesn't heal you. But then the relationship with the therapist, with the therapist's self, the attachment and the reflections could bring me to a place of growth. So there's two parts: the analysis, the figuring it out, and then the relationship that heals.
Well,
So the
the
healing
most-
is the relationship.
Right. The most mutative factor, all the studies show this. You could be in any treatment. Go study any treatment. You want to do this, you want to do a sensory motor, somatic, whatever you EMDR, do whatever you'd like. The most mutative factor in any psychotherapy is the relationship. And most of the studies show that. I can't cite you any studies right now, but the most mutative factor is in the relationship. That the relationship, what I call, there's some fancy words in there that I'll throw in, the intersubjective experience between the patient and the analyst and the therapist. But basically, that whole nuanced relationship is what heals. Is that the only thing? It's not the only thing. It's, as I'm saying, it's not just two levels. I think it's multiple levels of meaning and multiple levels. The ability for you to be empathically attuned to a patient and to understand them and what they're going through without being overwhelmed by them, and maintaining a neutral and appropriate stance, but not at the expense of being too cold and too distant. You have to kind of play that really well to know, okay, and and you have to know your patient. Do I move in? Do I move out? How am I this session? How am I that session? It's not. Theodore Reich, who was a very famous analyst, wrote a book which is a wonderful little book. It's not big, called "Listening with the Third Ear." It's an amazing little book. And in one of the chapters, he called that chapter "The Surprised Analyst." He said, when you hear something from a patient and then you go into something with the patient, there should be an element of surprise. He said, if you're going to go through your analytic training and become an analyst where you just follow formulaic, the formula of do this, do this, do this, do this, then you will never be able to reach a certain level of authenticity. You want to be authentic. You want to be able to be surprised by what the patient is doing and by how you're reacting. And he ends that thing to thine own self be true.
Just ask about a specific example. Like, for example, let's say someone is struggling with overeating. He just eats and he regrets. So now, let's say someone once told me, like, I know exactly why I'm eating this Danish. I know exactly what I'm thinking, what's behind it, and whatever, but I'm still eating it, right? So the knowing itself, the analyst, the knowing the analysis, it doesn't really help him.
Right.
So what's going to help him to stop?
Well, what would help him? What would help him?
The relationship with the therapist was help him stop overeating?
So go on. What would help him? So now they have a relationship with the therapist. You understand where this comes from, what the point is, why he's doing this, but he can't stop eating. And quite frankly, the analyst can't make him stop eating either. But what could help him? What could help him through that relationship?
He eventually develops into a better person, and then he could stop.
He develops into a person who is empowered within his own right of self-esteem and confidence, and says, you know what? I'm going out and I'm going to a program and I'm going to get the help that I need to lose the weight. He does it. In other words, instead of him, by somebody telling him, go to the eating disorders clinic and go on the diet and go take this and go take that, and they're just schlepping him along and telling him what to do, through the analytic or therapeutic relationship of any nature, he develops the strength and the willpower and the confidence in himself to say, you know what? Enough already. I need to take this bull by the horns. I need to stop eating. The therapist is not going to do it. My girlfriend's not going to do it. My wife is not going to do it. I need to do it. That's what the therapeutic relationship will help him with. I'm not going to.
I want to elaborate on one thing here, Yirmia, for you to understand about this, which is that you're looking at the analysis and then the relationship as two separate things. The analysis happens within the context of a relationship, and that means as follows. What we're really looking to accomplish in psychotherapy at large is what I would call self-acceptance, or there may be other languages and different modalities, but we're looking that a person should become more accepting of themselves, more loving towards themselves, more generous towards themselves. And what happens is that when we analyze and understand what's compelling a person to do what they do, why they're behaving in ways that seem maladaptive or dysfunctional to themselves, what they learn about themselves is that they hate themselves for the things that they do that they wish they didn't do, and B, that the things that they do that they wish they didn't do have meaning behind it. So by analyzing and understanding, we're actually creating self-compassion, which eventually leads to self-acceptance. And we can only do that when the therapist is truly attuned and truly interested and curious in what our experience is.
So the acceptance is going to heal him.
Acceptance will heal people, because now.
But yeah, can I just say something?
Sure.
I'm looking at who's Gregory? Hi, Gregory. Oh, you're the one that did this. Yeah. So Greg, if I may, Gregory is posting some things on the chat, and empowered through evolving secure attachment and the alliance with it. So that's a really nice point, and I could elaborate on that. Many people who come in with problems because if you go back to early infancy, and I look at the first 2 years, I mean, you could, anything pre-Oedipal, quite frankly. You talk about, secure attachment, avoidant, dismissive attachment, ambivalent, anxious attachment, or disorganized attachment. And when children, infants, babies are not securely attached, they grow up with a variety of different problems, right? And this is established pre-Oedipally. So a lot of the, personality disorders we see are because of pre-Oedipal dysfunction. Not everything, but, sometimes there's traumas and so on. But that's what this is about. If you look at the therapy as kind of redoing the mother-infant dyad almost, you're like redoing the mother-infant relationship. That's how Winnicott looked at it. You're creating a secure, so now they come in, they're insecure, they're avoidant, they're dismissive, they're anxious, they're this, they're that. And what are you doing what is the mutative factor of the therapy doing? You were creating a space, right? The analytic third space, the intersubjective arena between you and the patient, where you are going to heal them by giving them trust and stability and safety, listening to anything they say. Patients come in, I have nothing to talk about today. Everything's fine. I say, you know what? I don't care what you talk about. The golden rule, Freud's golden rule. Say whatever comes to mind. That's his line. Say whatever comes to mind. Nah. They start out talking about the weather because they want to be polite. They end up talking about some deep-seated who knows what. That's what we call association, the free associative process of using analysis. And it gets layered and layered and layered and layered. How am I doing, Gregory? Okay. And layered and layered.
I like to say, by the way, for those of you who could turn on your videos, please turn on the videos. We get better feedback that way. It feels more authentic and real. And of course,
Yes,
those of you who are in pajamas.
I love seeing people. Who cares?
Right. If you're in pajamas and you don't want to show off your pajamas, that's okay. But if you don't mind, then we're cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, it gets very layered and very nuanced. But that's what, in a sense, you're almost recreating the mother-infant dyad in a really, really healthy way. And that is the healing. And then that person, and I've worked with so many patients, they're insecure, they're anxious, they can't get their act together. And then through the mutative and through the analytic relationship, because you are using yourself, so you're very, very exquisitely sensitive to what the patient brings to you, because you really understand yourself and all your own mishigasim, all your own craziness. The patient has the space to just heal. And, sometimes it takes a lot of long, hard work, especially I do a lot of work with sexual trauma, and it takes years. It just takes years and years and years.
And it could take a very long time for a person to start really trusting that the therapist is there for them, is safe.
Why would they trust? Why would
Why
they
would they
trust?
trust if their earlier experiences were always not trustworthy?
Right.
And that's
Why
where, again, that's where the intersect of analyzing and being there for the client happens, right? It's where if I start to notice the client is not trusting me, then I might say, I get the sense that you don't really believe that I'm sincere about this. Can you tell me more about that? And the client can start to somehow identify over the course of time that they never felt that they were really taken seriously.
Right. Christopher Bolas, there's a British analyst by the name of Christopher Bolas. He calls it musings. The treatment modality calls it musings. I wonder about this. I'm wondering about this. I'm wondering about that. You never tell a patient, so in an interpretation, so this is why you think this way. This is why you feel this way. How do you know how they're thinking, quite frankly? And how do you know how they're feeling? But if you really do feel, you do know, you don't present it that way. You are gentle and you say, I'm wondering about this and this and this that you just said, or this and this and this that you just dreamt, that you bring in a dream. I wonder about that. What could that be, perhaps? It's perhaps and wondering all the way through. And you get much more out of the patient when you do your perhaps and you're wondering, because you don't tell them what they're feeling. Who wants to be told what they're feeling?
It elicits some defensiveness also, some defensiveness, sure.
And then they'll say, like, how dare you? How dare you tell me what I'm thinking and feeling? But if you wonder about it, it creates the space.
Yeah, well, think about it. If you wonder, then it also affords them an opportunity to either agree with you and feel connected, because they feel if you're understanding them, they feel very connected, or to disagree with you and have you lean in more and get more, which creates more of a connection and a closeness. So it's win-win.
And sometimes you need to understand yourself and no matter how well you understand yourself and you use yourself and you understand your countertransference, there might be things that are still unconsciously, issues for you. Lou Aaron, who was the head of postdoc, who died many years ago, not many years ago, several years ago. He was an amazing, brilliant analyst. He was the director of postdoc where I trained. And he wrote an amazing book called Mutuality in Psychoanalysis. I forget something about mutuality is in the title. And he says in the book, I often ask patients if they notice something in me. Do they notice something in me that I might not notice in myself? Because he invites patients to talk about, about what they see in him. And then he can use that. That's another way that he can use the self to say, wow, am I doing that? Is that how I'm, that's the impact I'm having on this patient? So that's
a great intervention.
Yeah.
Let's take a question from Goldie, who's been raising her hand for so long that she probably lost circulation. Go ahead. Thanks for raising your hand and thanks for hanging.
Goldie. Hi, Goldie.
Hi.
How are you?
First of all, thank you. This is so fun just to watch your energy. It's so nice also to see that, like,
see what happens when you love what you do.
Yes. Yeah.
We're going to analyze the term. We're going to analyze the term "watch your energy."
Yeah.
Okay. I'm curious. I know this is a little bit of like, absolutes, but is there ever really a place for self-disclosing more than just a building rapport, self-disclosing, like, oh, I also like the color pink and like I also hated recess in school, like real actual self-disclosing? Is there really a place for that?
Excellent question. I'm trying to think of an example where I did maybe not a major self-disclosure, but a little bit of a self-disclosure. Countertransference disclosures I do as needed. So you know the difference, right? You're not talking about a transference disclosure. A countertransference disclosure is when you're discussing what the patient, especially with projective identification, what the patient's doing to you. So
so in IFS, I am IFS, and IFS, you tell the patient what parts are coming up for you right now. That I do. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's.
Andy, can I give in a place where I feel that self-disclosure is indicated? It's one of my pet peeves.
Sure.
By the way, I just want to FYI, I once gave a workshop for Nefesh International on self-disclosure, on the topic of self-disclosure. It's out there if you want to listen to it. It's for sale through Nefesh. And it was, I thought, very well received. I think a place for self-disclosure, and again, Hindie, correct me if you disagree with this,
Yeah.
would be when you're in the space with a client who has been very neglected and is very alone, and the disclosure of the self would make them feel important and valuable or valued. So
Valued.
the disclosure is specifically for the purpose of, this is someone who is forlorn, it's somebody who's never been important, and by you disclosing something, you are making them feel like a human.
Okay, so
Can
then
you give me an example?
Okay, so I'll
Um,
tell you, I'll
yeah.
give you an example, because, see, I free associated to what he's saying. So this happened fairly recently. I have a patient who a young woman who I'm working with a couple of times a week, about 2 years. And she is extremely, extremely insecure because she can't, there is no internal sense of self. She basically lives by the appraisals that she gets by others, right? So other people will tell her she's wonderful, so she thinks she's wonderful. Other people think she's a loser, so she's a loser. There is no embodiment of a sense of self that, and that goes, I'm not going to go into all the details, but that goes back to early childhood. She was bullied as a little girl. She had parents who really love her. They really do, but they weren't maybe the best role model for her, although they meant well, and they're very accomplished parents. They're not, but no abuse or anything like that. Just not enough love and attention and attunement. That's the right word, properly. And she constantly is pulling at me. She's pulling at me for years. Tell me that you love me. Tell me that you like me. Tell me that I'm great. Tell me that I'm special. Tell me. And she pulls for it. The more she pulls for it, and I have helped her over the thing, but I do tell her things, or I advise her more than I advise other patients, because she's lost. She's totally lost, and she doesn't have anybody, and she respects, obviously, what I say. So there will be times where, against my better judgment sometimes, I will help her make some decisions about what she should do. But that's not enough for her. Tell me. And she pulls at me and pulls at me. And finally, I realized that, she's not even trying that hard to be needy or demanding. At the beginning, I thought, manipulation, neediness, demanding, all that stuff. And I realized it's like, think early attachment. It's like this little girl, this little 3-year-old, 4-year-old who just needs mommy's love. She just needs mommy's love. And we were talking one day, this goes back, I don't know, maybe a few months ago. We were talking one day, like, she's so vulnerable. And that's why she feels she can never succeed, because it's all about vulnerabilities. And she hasn't incorporated the sense of self. And it's like, what am I doing wrong here? After a while, you feel like, okay, I don't know. What am I doing wrong? Like, how can I help this person? I really want to help. So what I did was one day, I said one day, we were talking about vulnerabilities, how vulnerable she is, and she just can't get past it and so on. And I said to her, we're all vulnerable. We all have vulnerabilities. And I disclosed, and I don't even remember what I said, so it's better this way, so I shouldn't have to say it because I don't remember what I said. But I disclosed.
Oh, this was the punchline of the story.
Yeah,
We get to hear
I
yourself.
I think I disclosed an area of vulnerability where I also felt within me, I had once felt very insecure about something. And I said, we all go through this, but how did you get past it? How do you get past it? And I said, over time, when you kind of work on yourself and you really try to help yourself, soothe yourself, heal yourself, by working in therapy and so on, you slowly are able to say, not that you don't have the vulnerabilities, I have the vulnerabilities. I still have certain vulnerabilities. Everybody has vulnerabilities because there's no such thing as a perfect person. So everybody has vulnerabilities, but the real trick of the trade is to be able to take your vulnerabilities and work with them, understand them, and get past them so that you could still function and be happy, and you could still whatever. So I shared this with her about my own vulnerabilities and how I work on getting past them, even though I still have them. And it was like a little magical pill all of a sudden. And thank you. Even someone like you, Hindie, has vulnerabilities. Even someone like you knows that. And then we have to get into the whole perfection thing, because she thinks that then you get into this over idealization of the object, right? The over idealized object, the therapist who's the over idealized object. You got to get past that with them. but that was very powerful for her. And it was very helpful. And that is a nice, I think,
Yeah,
example.
that's a great vignette, but that's a really profound kind of self-disclosure. You know, there's even more simple, innocuous self-disclosures, which sometimes put the therapist at discomfort. And again, like sometimes intuitively, you have to be able to identify. There's clients who push a lot of limits and ask you personal questions, versus a client again who seems so forlorn and empty and almost denying them
A good word.
empty and like almost denying them. They ask you a basic question about, like, if you have any children or which neighborhood you live in or something very innocuous, and by denying it to them, it could be just devastating. And that kind of just very innocuous self-disclosure, would be dependent on who the client is and if they're pushing boundaries, or if they're grasping for some validation that they're worthy of being answered. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, by the way, you're never anonymous totally to the patient. Never. From the first phone call,
They can see you.
your voice. First of all, if they see you, right? So I look a certain way.
They can feel you.
They could feel you and they could see you. They walk into your office. Your office is decorated a certain way. You dress a certain way. Your voice has a certain tonal,
Inflections.
right?
Inflections you use.
And yeah. And so they know you, right? And what's the real, one of the goals in analytic work or in any good therapeutic work, to know and to be known, to know and to be known, right? They want me to know them, and they want to be known. They want me to know them, and they want me to be known by them as well in some form, right? And that kind of increases the connection. So there's no such thing as anonymity. And now with social media, forget it. There's no such thing as that. They watch videos on you, they watch meetings that you went to,
I'm
parties.
not so famous like you. I have no such problems.
Yeah, so they do that. And it's I can tell you stories how people walk in. I saw your son. I played football with you. How do you know my son? If I would have known this, maybe I wouldn't have treated you. How do you know? Oh yeah, we're on the same football team. Like, there goes my anonymity. Right. So
why do therapists feel so...
nowadays there's no such thing as anonymity. It's really in my days when I did my analysis, in the beginning of analysis, I knew one way to reach my analyst. You call up the phone, you leave a message on the machine, and then when he's ready, he will call you back. No text, no email, no internet, no chats, garnished, nothing. Nowadays, then we get into a whole other topic of texting. Do you text with your patients? Should you? If you do, what's it about? Is it only about, scheduling? I can make it. Let's reschedule the appointment. I have a philosophy, a policy. And I tell this to my patients. If they want to change an appointment, I'll use the texting for appointments. I'm running a few minutes late, stuff like that. I never get into clinical discussions with patients. Never. And if I am, countertransference. I'm already analyzing.
You're getting some of your own needs met there. Absolutely. Right. Let's take a question from Shimon. Go ahead, Shimon.
First of all, thank you very much, Hindie. It's wonderful to listen to you, and it's really wonderful, especially when I'm a student of Moshe, which is also very psychoanalytic.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I am a student of Moshe.
You. Where are you, Shimon?
I'm not hidden, I hope.
Are you hidden?
No.
He should pop up on your screen if you have a speaker view.
I do have a speaker. I'm looking for him, but okay.
Okay, go ahead, Shimon. Ask your question.
Tell you something. I'll share something.
Oh, there you are. I see you.
Yeah. I'm also looking for myself sometimes. So I said, it feels.
Okay. So what is your question?
And let me ask you a question. You mentioned
I'm not hearing him clearly.
Shimon, your mic, something wrong with your mic, and it's breaking in and out. Try one more time.
Is it better now?
Well, let's try it.
Well, I was wondering if we're talking about I'm doing a lot of anxiety. You hear me?
No, you're breaking out. Okay, let's go to Yossi. Yossi, go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering about, you were saying that we us as therapists, we always feel we want to protect ourselves, and our clients shouldn't know too much information about us. So, and what's really behind it? That we always want to protect ourselves. They shouldn't know too much. Is it something that really will make a difference in the healing process for them? Like if they would know too much, or it's like our own issues that we're afraid of different things, they're gonna know. Like if we would know really what's bothering us, if they would know everything about us, maybe.
So, you know, the whole concept of doing analytic work and a lot of therapeutic work, not only analytic work, is being that what we would call historically the blank slate. So you are the blank slate, you are the anonymous analyst, which doesn't happen anymore, unfortunately. And therefore they could come in and all of their issues can be projected onto you. Their issues, transference, will be projected onto you, and they'll be able to work it out in such a way without being busy with, oh, I know what she does, and I know what she thinks, and I know how she feels, and I know her favorite color, and I know where she lives, and I know how many kids she has, and I know what kind of husband she has. It's all, then now we have to go through all of that. And what do you think she thinks about this? And what do you think she's going to think of me? Because I know she knows this, and I know she got da.
I mean, a simple example of this is clients who come to me and won't curse in my office or swear because they say, oh, you look like a yeshiva guy, and it would be inappropriate for me to swear or curse in front of you. Again, very simple example. So they're not bringing their full self to the office. Obviously, just our presence is going to cause people to behave in certain ways or prohibit them from behaving in certain ways. But here you have an example where the client can't just be their full selves because they have to worry about me. They know something about me that makes them worry.
Correct. And when you were on the blank slate, they don't know anything about you, and they could say what the hell they want, and they could have whatever feelings, and they can project them all onto you. And when they know too much about you, it gets in the way. It just gets in the way. And that's why I feel that in today's day and age, it's really, it could be really difficult. But, but everything is like what my supervisor of 30 some odd years taught me, Dr. Laura Barbanel, everything is grist for the mill. They know something about you, analyze it. They know something, analyze it. Everything is grist for the mill. Don't, like once something came up and I said, oh my God, they're going to know this and this. And I think I once made a faux pas in therapy and I said something that maybe I shouldn't have. I ran to the supervisor. I said, oh my God, I said this. And everything is grist for the mill. It'll work itself out, because if you are attuned to yourself and if you're attuned to your patient, you'll work it out. I mean, unless you do something like really, who knows how inappropriate, but otherwise you just work it out. So hopefully there's nothing that you could say, hopefully that's too damaging.
Okay, Chumi, let's take a question from Chumi.
Hi, thank you so much for having this. And I really appreciate this workshop. My question was, in a group setting, are you able to be like a therapeutic person and build that relationship and everything?
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't. I'm first of all, I'm looking for you. Are you? Is your picture there?
No.
Oh, okay. So now do me a favor.
Hi, I'm here. Do you see me?
Well, I'm looking now. Oh, there you are. Hi, Chumi. How are you?
Hi.
Okay, so now repeat your question, please.
Yes, I was wondering, like in a group setting, are you able to be that therapeutic person?
What do you mean by a group setting? If you're running a group?
Yeah, if you're running a group, are you able to be that therapeutic person and heal other people by being present and attuned to what they're talking about?
I hope that, I mean, if you're a good group therapist and therefore you are trained in doing group therapy, part of the skill set that you're learning, it is how to be empathically attuned to the members of the group. I mean, that's I know that Moshe had Irving Yalom on at one point, who is the master of group therapy. I mean, you have to be specific. I don't do groups. I do supervision groups, but I don't do group psychotherapy. I think I did it in my psychiatric internship, who knows how many years ago, but I don't do groups other than clinical groups. But I think that if you are, there's training that goes into being a group therapist, where, of course, I mean, how could you be a group therapist if you're not like exquisitely attuned to the people in the group? And not only you have to be attuned to the individual people, you have to be attuned to the machinations of what's going on.
I'm wondering if that's part of Chumi's question, if she's asking, you can't stay strictly attuned to one person. and really fully analyze them in a group setting. So
No, you're not doing analysis in a group setting. Are you talking about, can you do psychoanalysis in a group setting? Is that what
No,
you're asking?
my question was really like, are you able to be a therapeutic group leader? Even though, yeah, part of the groups that I run are not very focused on like inner stuff. It's more just
Right.
like,
So it depends on the group, right? If you're
Mhm.
in a group with, which I did actually, when I worked with my chronic schizophrenic population, I ran groups there all the time because that was more skill-based. And that
Mhm.
was more teaching them particular skills and, interpersonal relationships. And we had a poetry group and we had different things. So it wasn't a psychoanalytic group. It was a literature group or a poetry group or how to get along with one another. So when you're teaching, depends what the group is for.
Mhm.
Right? Now, are there
Yeah, for
people that
sure.
are there people that do groups from a psychoanalytic perspective? I guess there are. I'm sure there are actually, but I'm not that familiar with it, A. And B, it's not the same as doing individual psychoanalysis with an individual patient. It's different. It's a different skill set.
Mhm.
It depends. You have to
Okay.
figure out what your group is about. Are you doing a DBT group, skills training? And then you're not necessarily doing analytic work with them. You're doing DBT work with them.
Got it.
Yeah.
But even in that DBT mindset, are you able to be that therapeutic person if like you attune to what they're saying and like
So,
you reflect back to them and show them that you understand them?
all right. So that's a really nice question. And I'll tell you, it depends how you conceptualize. So I listen to a patient and I conceptualize everything within a psychodynamic or psychoanalytic frame. So even if I'm not treating psychoanalytically and I'm not I'm not interpreting or I'm not reflecting in a psychoanalytic way in my mind, in the computer, I am conceptualizing them and understanding them through a psychoanalytic lens. And that will affect how I speak to them. In other words, so am I doing psychoanalysis with them? No, but I possibly speak to them in a certain way because of how I'm conceptualizing them in how they're talking and how they're presenting to the group. Or this one's the leader and this one's the follower and this one is manipulating everybody and this one's this and this one's that. I will conceptualize, and I usually conceptualize from a dynamic frame, but that doesn't mean everything you conceptualize, you say.
Right.
You don't say everything. And also timing in analytic work is everything. Don't try to see like I had this once with the supervisor. They were very bright and they come in and they said, well, I told the patient the first session. I said, what? The first session? Do that. What are you trying to prove how smart you are? Don't try to prove how smart you are. Listen, absorb, hear what they're saying, develop your alliance. Then you could say whatever you want. By the way, I have to do a shout out. I see you, Ellie Weinreb.
yes.
Ellen, I see you.
He had his video on at some point. I don't know if it's still on.
It's still on.
Well, I've been trying to show clients how smart I am for a long time and I still haven't. So
Right.
working on that. Okay.
Don't do it. It doesn't pay.
I still haven't been able to. Shandel, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I have a question. Two questions, actually. I have a client that she keeps telling me that she doesn't like that the therapist feels like above. Like if I share with her, it's more like she feels more like, okay, like I'm not so Balgaividic. How would you do with that?
Who is feeling Balgaividic?
No, she said that like if I am only the professional and I don't share, like if she asked me, like, let's say, do you understand like the example that you gave, like, let's say she would say, did you ever deal with something like that? And I say, it's not about me, it's about you. And she said, oh, it sounds very like Balgaividig. I can't know anything about you. It's very,
I think what you're trying to say is that the patient experiences it as very off-putting. Like it's very hierarchical, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
So we talk about in analysis, we talk about mutuality, right? The intersubjective experience where we're kind of feeding off each other, but we talk about mutual, but asymmetrical. It's not symmetrical. It's mutual because we're intersubjectively kind of working with each other, but it's not asymmetric. It's not symmetrical. They're coming to you for a reason. This is not a peer group. They're coming to you because you are the expert, and they're coming to you for you to heal them. So there has to be a piece of it that's not symmetrical. You understand? So now,
Yeah, it's a very good point.
the way that you answer her is the brilliance, so to speak, because she is obviously somebody who maybe felt always that people were above her, or she's not good enough. And like she's sharing everything and you're not sharing back. I'm not good enough for you to share with me. You're a balgaiva, you're a big shot, you don't have to share with me. I would get in there and go underneath and say, what is that about? You know, don't make any major interpretations as to, oh, this must mean, you know, no, don't go there. Just say, I wonder what that's about, that this is something that you think that maybe as a therapist, I'm a big shot or I'm too pretentious because I don't necessarily want to share with you. Stay with the material. Don't make fancy interpretations. Stay with the material. Analyze, state what she's saying. She's saying you're a bit, pretentious because you don't want to, So then you go underneath. Go underneath. What does that mean to you? What does that remind you of? Who does that remind you of?
Okay, let's go back to Shimon, who had his hand raised before. Go ahead, Shimon.
Yeah, hi. Do you hear me now?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, thank you very much. So first of all, thank you very much. It was wonderful listening, and it good information. It could be very useful.
Thank you.
I'm wondering regarding anxiety, which happens to be that I experienced a lot. First of all, myself, and then clients, and it's very often that the client, they come in, they don't even know what's flying. They don't even know that they have any anxiety. They just know that they don't feel well. And sometimes they have panic attacks. And they don't even know how to describe. They do know when you start asking them questions, let's say they would tell you that they have no interest in living at all, whatever kind of stuff, but they cannot express what they feel and how they feel and when they feel. And you have to, you're starting asking them questions, you start realizing that it's major anxiety, and it's up to a point that they feel that there's no reason for them to live, but they can't express how and where and what. Sometimes, even though after a while, after you're already connected with them, you're helping them, and they know already what's going on, they still sometimes they're gonna come say, I don't feel well, I don't know what. I get up in the morning and I daven. By the end of davening, I feel something. I don't know. It's not good. And a lot of times I feel I can share with them and I can get them to a point that they can explain how they feel. And then it's possible to explain to them what's happening to them and why they're feeling like this. And then it's much easier. Like they're gonna say, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But I do have to use myself. I said, is this the feeling that you have? Is this how you feel? Is this what's happening to you? So what will you say to that?
So in other words, you're using yourself to help identify with the client. So
Yeah.
that
So your job is to help them understand not only what they're feeling, but eventually why they're feeling a certain way. Now, if this is mysterious to you, or if it's something that's difficult that you have a hard time getting underneath, I don't know what kind of supervision that you're getting this particular case, but if this is, and this could be with anyone, with any case, when a person comes in and they have what you're describing to me sounds like the patient is describing like a free-floating anxiety. Number one, they're not in touch with their feelings and their thoughts. And number two, they have this free-floating anxiety because they're not in touch with their feelings and their thoughts. So it just kind of displays as this anxiety, which they don't even know how to express it. And therefore they could be kind of putting it into you and like, what do I do with this? Because I don't even have a sense of how to deal with this because they themselves don't know, how to present this. So when it comes to these type of things and it really becomes like mysterious for you or for anybody, here, I would just say that you need to talk to somebody. I assume that you have ongoing supervision. everybody must be, especially, I don't know how long you're a therapist, how many years you're a therapist, but you need to kind of, this is something that would be a beautiful example of what you might go to a supervisor and say, here, and I don't know if you take notes. I was trained during my analytic training to take copious notes during sessions because I was doing analysis with a patient. I would sit behind the patient. They would lie down, face that way, and I would be sitting here. So I would take notes, and then I would review them with my supervisor. So you might want to take notes, during this.
It's an interesting.
I think my question wasn't clear enough, so I think I'm going to repeat it. I don't think my supervisor would ever understand how my client feels as good as I, because I myself suffered from anxiety. So when they feel like, let's say, after they got up 2 hours later, they have headaches and stuff like this, I a lot of times can like give them an example of how they feel, and they would say, exactly, this is it. How do you know? It's unbelievable. That's exactly how I feel. And I don't know why it's happening to me. What happened all of a sudden? I got up in such a good mood, and afterwards, this is happening to me. And most of the time,
but you might be over-identifying with your patient because you feel the same way. So if you're over-identifying with your patient, the good news is you know how they feel. But the bad news might be that you don't necessarily know how to help them because you yourself are caught up in that countertransferential issue of the anxiety. So you can understand them really well, which is great. But now what? How are you helping them? And how are you helping yourself help them?
No, so first of all is to explain their feelings. That's the number one. And then after they feel that they feel like understood, they feel that you understand them, you know what's going on, then they could say, yes, this is how I feel, and then you go into them. So whatever.
Okay, so can I just say something? The reason that, first of all, you should be getting supervision on this case in every case, because every person should be getting supervision. So you know my bias towards that. But second of all, you say that the supervisor won't understand the patient the way you do. But the supervisor will listen to what you're presenting with your patient and how you identify with this patient, because you totally understand what the patient is experiencing, and will talk about the case on different levels. He'll talk about the transference to you, and he'll talk about the countertransference of you to the patient and what might be getting in the way. It will be helpful. And if a person's really a good supervisor and knows their stuff, they'll be able to help you even if they haven't experienced exactly the same feelings or experience that you have or that your patient has. That's what being a well-trained supervisor knows how to do. So I would just say to you, I understand that you identify with them and that you understand them very well, but that might be, in a sense, getting in the way of your being able to truly, deeply help them. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
So what he's saying is that even though this is the case and I know it well, I still shouldn't use this to try to explain their feelings.
You can explain their feelings, but you now once you explain their feelings, you want to get into healing it.
Well,
I wasn't talking about the healing part.
Yeah, I think there's another concern, another nuance here, which is you may be projecting your experience on them. In other words, you may explain to a client or over-explain to a client what they're experiencing, in which they'll nod to and say, yes, that's how I'm feeling it. But if you had them describe it to you, or if you had been able to elicit it from them because you didn't know, they may actually be able to provide a more accurate description. So imagine, this is let's say what people would argue that Orthodox therapists shouldn't work with Orthodox clients. Why? If we go into a person from a different culture, they don't really understand our culture, so they have to ask and be truly curious. So in a sense, there's a disadvantage in being the same, and an advantage in being different, in that you can get the best information out of the client if you don't know exactly what they're experiencing than if you assume that you do. Does that make more sense?
And also, a lot of people don't go to a lot of Orthodox patients don't go to Orthodox therapists because there's a lot of shame and guilt, and they're embarrassed to kind of talk about their vulnerabilities with a Orthodox therapist because they'll feel that they'll be judged. So they want to go to somebody really neutral and somebody who's either not religious or not Jewish.
All different, yeah. Okay, let's take a question from Yitzchak. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. Yeah, I'll say I'm relatively new to this field. I'm interning right now, but I'm finding it very informative. I'm wondering if we may call it in a somewhat on a technical note, from what age do you find analytical work being effective? Because I mean, there is, as you started off, there is the need for the understanding.
Okay, so it's a good question. I was trained in adult psychoanalysis, which technically means 18 and over adults.
Mhm.
However, there is a whole, one of the things I wanted to do, and then I said, okay, enough already, because I had all these different trainings under my belt. So I was actually interested in also being trained in child psychoanalysis, which is a different way of doing psychoanalysis. It's a little bit different because because when you're working with children, there's different modalities, whether it's through play, whether it's through a lot of different ways of doing child analysis. Also, you have to understand, well, for adult analysis, you need to understand the developmental cycles. You know, if you look at attachment theory, you understand development in that sense. If you look at Freudian theory, right, id, ego, superego, and the 5 phases of development, and so on and so forth. So there's different structural theories and other types of theories that you need to understand really well when working with children, and the techniques are different. So there is a whole different track for child psychoanalysis. And I know Adelphi has a good program if anybody's interested. There's other programs that have child psychoanalytic training programs. I know Adelphi was one I was looking into when I was interested in possibly pursuing that after I got my adult postdoc. So you'd have to be trained for all this stuff. You have to be trained. I mean, anything. Think about any of the therapies that we're doing nowadays. It's not just psychoanalysis. Think of sensory motor. Think of, and going to a 4-day training, with all due respect to everybody out there, going to a 4-day training is a nice, like, little appetizer for, learning about that modality. It is not in and of itself.
Supervision.
It's training and training and training and training and supervision and your own treatment. Even if you're going to be a sensory motor therapist, you should be in your own treatment. Everybody should be in their own treatments. So, yeah. So you have to go into that, follow your passion.
If I may ask another brief question, and again, my understanding of psychoanalysis is very limited, but based on what you described to one of our earlier participants who asked how it works. So you kind of basically threw out the idea that it kind of gives the person the space to rewire his whole how he interacts with the world, with his environment, with himself, and so on and so forth. Can you briefly kind of just like explain where psychoanalysis is different than Rogerian humanistic client-focused therapy?
Client-centered.
Yeah.
So I mean,
because I mean, I'm sorry, but the base I understand that is also basically giving him the space and on the fertile soil just to be able to really grow and develop.
Right. So Rogerian is, unconditional positive regard. Moshe, is that correct?
Yes.
With Rogerian therapy, it's unconditional positive regard. So kind of whatever they bring to you, and you just you're very supportive and you very much validating. And, it's, I'm not saying it can't be therapeutic. It is very therapeutic for many people. I see that more as what I would call maybe a supportive method of psychotherapy, as opposed to a psychoanalytic psychotherapy, which is really getting to, maybe earlier infant attachments, conflict, drives, sexual, libidinal, and aggressive impulses. I find psychoanalytic training and theory and practice, I just find it much deeper.
I'm going to answer Yitzhak's question. In what Rogers believed was that if you allow the person the space, they will flourish on their own. So if you can be the object to provide that space, to provide the safety, to provide the comfort, to provide the sense of value, then the person will just develop their own self-esteem and sort of run with it. What analysis wants to do is it wants to do more than that. Okay, so it wants to have the person understand themselves better. It wants to create meaning and understanding into the person's experiences themselves. It's more active in this way than Rogers. If you watch Rogers sessions, which are fascinating to watch. I mean, many people just thought that it was, people ridiculed him for just repeating what the client said. But if you attune yourself to Rogers and watch his sessions, you'll understand that what he's doing is he's creating that space in an extremely profound way. And the client it enables the client to talk more. It enables the client to open more. It enables the client, I would say, to be more. And that's what Rogers did, and he was quite brilliant at it. And so analysis is looking to do more than that, but I think that analysis would agree with Rogers and Kohut, that empathy is really one of the key ingredients in a person changing. So analysis would say that it's one of the aspects or ingredients to the change.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So basically saying is that psychoanalysis is kind of more active in terms of like unearthing or discovering or looking for things
Correct.
that might have gone wrong.
Interpretations and right, that's right.
Right. Got it. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
It's remember, Freud's paper was very aptly called Remembering, Repeating, and Working Through. We talk about the same issues and the same themes over and over again, to the point where the patient will say to me, am I boring you already? You're not boring me. You need to go through this over and over again until all the little nuances are worked out. And that's why one of the reasons that paper is so important, remembering, repeating, and working through.
Yeah, could we take one last question from Goldie before we call it a night?
One last question.
Actually, I just see Malika put something into the chat that actually is similar to what I'm about to ask. So I'm playing devil's advocate here, meaning psychoanalysis can take 10, 20 years. What's to say that
Doesn't have to take that long.
meaning what's the meaning? First of all, what's the shortest it can take?
Psychoanalysis. You could do a good psychoanalytic psychotherapy. Let's say if you're on the couch 3 to 5 times a week, which I know is very daunting for many people, but if you're
twice a week is reasonable.
Twice a week.
I'm just thinking even just like people who don't have the extra money.
You can't do psychoanalysis once
6 years.
You could do psychoanalysis 2 to 3 times a week.
Wow.
And also a lot of it depends on, are you lying down or are you sitting up? When you lie down, it's much more intense because you do not see the face of the analyst. You have no distracting stimulants. That's the whole idea of lying down. Lying down means that you are not looking at the therapist's face, so you're not getting any feedback on what the therapist might be feeling, thinking, because they pick up vibes, right? You're just looking into space. Like I'll tell them, just focus on anything you want, on the wall, on the ceiling, whatever. And they're lying very comfortably on the couch, on a pillow and all that. And then the free associative process just flows. I did both. I was lying down for 9.5 years. And then the rest of the time I was sitting up. It's very different. It was very, very different.
So you're saying that
not everybody has to go into analysis for 9.5 or 10.5 or 22 years. They don't have to.
But I'm saying, who's to say that they should, meaning, when would you say a client should go for analysis rather than, I don't know, going to a somatic therapist, and in 10 sessions, they can get somewhere that an analysis might take them 3 years?
So, yeah.
Well, so
that's what I'm asking. Meaning, when do you do that?
I would say most probably you go to maybe, or, I think that the somatic therapy, or sensory motor therapy will be very, very helpful in freeing the person of many of their symptoms. And, the developmental, when you're looking at it from a developmental trauma, they do very much care about what happened to you in the beginning. Some sensory motor or somatic therapists, they are attuned to that.
Yeah.
But if you're going because you were in a car crash and you're very traumatized by the car crash, you may not need, and you have a very healthy psyche. Otherwise, you don't need psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is not for everybody.
Well, I want to just point out also, I see from my caseload over the years, there isn't a time that you have to be finished. You could grow. What we see with clients is that they grow. It's an evolution, and people change and grow and evolve. And any client or patient is free at their own will to say, I feel like I'm at a good place now. I feel stronger. I feel better. I feel more assertive. I feel more entitled, and to leave. And many of them do. And then some of them will come back 2 years later. Many of my clients have come to me for 2 years or 3 years or a year and a half or even 6 months and said, okay, I feel like the reason I came, I'm doing much better. I want to go. I want to take a break. And I say, you're always invited back. I say it to most of them.
Right.
You're
I
always
always
invited
tell
back.
patients, I am always a phone call away. That's it. I'm always a phone call away. Nowadays, you could say I'm always a text away, but I'm always a phone call away. So I have seen patients. I remember that I'm thinking of one patient in particular. She came to me because she was very scared to get married. She was really scared to get married. She refused to put the invitations into the mailbox. Somebody called up to refer her, a relative, and said, you got to see this young woman. She's goes to the mailbox with the box of invitations, and she stands there frozen. She can't put the invitations into the mailbox. So I saw her, long story short, I saw her for a few months. She put them in the mailbox. She got married, and I was seeing her on and off. I think her oldest child now is 30, I don't know, married. She's marrying off her kids, and she would come to me back and forth. I never saw her children, but she would come to me as needed. You know, she would come over 20 some odd years, maybe close to 30 by now. I don't know how old is her oldest, but she would come to me all the time whenever something came up that she just kind of needed that little boost. And we would work together for a few weeks or a few months or a year or whatever. Okay, I'm feeling better now. Bye. I'll let you know if I have to come back. And this has been on and off for years. And it's very comforting to the person to know that I have other patients. I'm seeing someone now who I've known for 17 years.
That's right.
In other words,
And I also want to say that Judy Beck, okay, Mrs. CBT, Dr. CBT herself, has mentioned in a workshop. I was at a workshop with her about 12 years ago, and she said that she has a patient who she's seeing for the past 14 years. Okay, so, you know, nobody's married to psychoanalysis forever. They can grow, and when they feel better, they can leave. And
something, but I guess what I'm really asking, I'm just thinking like in terms of clients that don't have a lot of extra resources.
But we're trying to say you have to do what works for the patient.
Right.
If the patient can be healed through, short-term, you could do short-term psychoanalytic psychotherapy. You don't have to lie on the couch and who knows what. There is such a thing as short-term psychodynamic psychotherapy. You could do that, and it could be very helpful. You could do sensory motor psychotherapy, and then you may want to go a little deeper. So then you may want to consult with an analyst or a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. You have to kind of play with it depending on whatever your own inner development is and what your issues are and what your needs are. Nothing is set in stone. Don't be formulaic, be authentic. And the whole beauty of good psychoanalytic psychotherapy is using yourself and using your authenticity. You don't have to look in the book. Okay, the book says this, I got to do this or else I'm terrible.
There's a book called, I'm not a big reader, self-disclosure, but there is a book that I've glimpsed through over the years called Depth-Oriented Brief Therapy by Bruce Ecker. And now his modality has a different name to it. I forget what it's called, but it's also a very, very good, I found it to be a very helpful book in sort of like really zooming in on what your questions are, what you're really looking to find that I believe can, expedite the process, down to 25 years or something. But I found that to be helpful. So there are, there are more brief oriented kinds of therapies within the psychoanalytic framework that can help.
There's trauma-focused psychodynamic psychotherapy. It has an acronym to it, whatever. Trauma-focused psychodynamic, TFP, whatever. That's a very popular form of therapy because it's psychodynamic, but it's trauma-focused and it's brief. And you have to study that though. You can't just, we didn't get to this today, Moshe. Maybe we'll do this another time. I interpret dreams. I do dream analysis. I was trained to interpret dreams. I didn't just buy a book and say, oh, so it says that this symbolizes this and that symbolizes that. You don't do it that way. You're trained under supervision how to analyze a dream. But if you want to read about dreams and how to analyze them very creatively, and including the, what's popular now, which is the neurobiological model, you read Mark Blechner, B-L-E-C, put it in my sheet, B-L-E-C-H-N-E-R. Mark Blechner, he has 2 major books on dreams. He's amazing. And you could read all about his work with dreams. He's a postdoc person. He's just brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I tried to get him to come to Nefesh. He agreed. And then I think the pandemic hit and he got really scared. He says, I'm not going anywhere. So I have to try to get him back to Nefesh. But he's a brilliant analyst and a real, a real scholar in the interpretation of dreams and so on.